$58 today. 59.
Ayah 60 inshallah.
60.
Yeah.
Oh, this one has the notes in it.
Huh?
This one has the notes in it.
Let's put it from last week.
Oh. Collector's edition.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أستاذ رئيس. Okay, so alhamdulillah we've reached the 60th ayah of Surah Baqarah, and before we continue, just a quick summary of what we covered last lesson and what we've been covering for the last few lessons. In the last few lessons, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the last few ayat spoke about Bani Israel, and particularly about the different favors that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bestowed Bani Israel with. Now, every lesson we go over a few more favors, a few more stories of Bani Israel and their life and their habits and their mentality becomes more and more clear to us. Now, what is the purpose of going into the history and the mind and the mentality of the Bani Israel? There are many different reasons, but I just want to clarify it before we continue inshallah today. Now, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala throughout the Quran talks about many different nations. Allah talks about different nations, and He talks about the different prophets that were sent to them. For example, the Prophet Hud alayhi salam sent to the nation of Ad, and the Prophet Salih alayhi salam sent to the nation of Thamud, and so many other nations, and then the story of Ibrahim alayhi salam. So there are many stories in the Quran, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brings them for one purpose. But many purposes, but for us the main purpose is to take lessons from these stories, for us to learn from these stories. Because when we study those nations, those people, the things that happened in their lives, it serves as inspiration and warning towards our own lives. The famous Spanish philosopher, George Estonia, that those who don't learn history are doomed to repeat it. And that's our main reason for learning history. Our main reason for looking at the Tafseer of the Quran is so that we can take lessons from these previous nations. And when we study the Bani Israel, now Bani Israel is one of those nations that passed not long before us. Their history is quite recent compared to the other nations mentioned in the Quran. And there are many lessons, and you can see from their mentality and from their thought process and their behavior that their habits are something that we see in our daily life every single day. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala favored them in the same way that He has favored us. And that shows that because Allah favored them, He gave them many benefits and many ni'mas. And in the same way, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us many benefits and ni'mas. However, they wasted away those benefits and ni'mas. They took advantage and they were not thankful to Allah. They behaved in the incorrect manner. And we need to take heed and lessons from that and prevent the same ending and conclusion occurring on us. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continues with ayah number 60. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَإِذِ اسْتَسْقَى مُوسَى لِقَوْمِهِ And remember when Musa alayhi salam, Moses prayed for water for his people. فَقُلْ نَضْرِبْ بِعَصَاكَ الْحَجْرِ. We said, strike the rock with your staff. فَانْفَجَرَتْ مِنْهُ اثْنَتَا عَشَرَةَ عَيْنًا. Then 12 springs gushed out. قَدْ عَلِمَ كُلُّ أُنَاسٍ مَشْرَبَهُمْ. And each tribe knew its drinking place. كُلُوا وَاشْرَبُوا مِنْ رِزْقِ اللَّهِ. We then said, eat and drink of Allah's provisions. وَلَا تَعْثَوْا فِي الْأَرْضِ مُفْسِدِينَ. And do not go about spreading corruption in the land. Now, in this ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is referring to a different occasion and a different story. And on this occasion, the Bani Israel, along with Musa alayhi salam, were traveling through the desert, and they got to a point where they had no water remaining and they needed water. And so Musa alayhi salam, he made dua to Allah, saying, "O Allah, send water down for us." And this was the method that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose for the water to be given to them, through rocks. With the staff of Musa alayhi salam striking the rock, springs came gushing out. Now, usually Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brings water to people in a very different manner, a very simple manner, and that is rain, of course. However, over here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave them the same water, however in a very different manner. What is the reason for this? Well, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted to give them a miracle so that they may be more grateful and show more appreciation. For example, in our lives, if we are given something in a very easy manner, for example, we need a new car, and after looking for a day, you find a car and you buy it, may be your own city, somewhere close by, and you continue living your life with that car, and you're happy with that car. You got it for a good price, everything worked out. However, if you have to struggle to get that car, if you're looking for a certain car, and for weeks go by, months go by, and you don't have a car, during that time you have to travel by bus, by taxi, and you're really struggling, you're making dua every day, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives you a car. In the second scenario, Allah has done something specifically for you, and for that you are a lot more grateful. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave them this water as a miracle in order for them to be more appreciative and to appreciate the ni'mah that He had given them. Now, to continue, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَانْفَجْرَتْ مِنْهُ اثْنَتَا عَشَرَةَ عَيْنًا, that gushed out from it 12 different springs. What was the reason for 12 different springs? The reason was Bani Israel was a huge tribe, around 1 million in number, the Mufassirin say, and each tribe the whole tribe was broken down into 12 different parts. Now, each part of that tribe of Bani Israel had their own different spring to drink from, and this was to prevent any argumentation that may begin and incept within the Bani Israel. And we've seen within the Bani Israel how easy it was for them to start arguing and to follow the way of the shaitan, the footsteps of the shaitan, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was preventing that. In the same way, we've seen previously how when Allah sent man and salwa, He would make it go corrupt really quickly, so they were unable to store it and gain a monopoly over it and then sell it for higher prices, again to stop any argumentation, to prevent any evil happening. And this in itself, when you think about this, how big of a ni'mah it is when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala stops any evil happening in our lives, prevents us from a life of evil. And it's difficult to see this because we can't see that evil happening. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can obviously see our future, dictates our future, but we as humans, we can only see the present, the hal that is happening in our current time. And there's so many a time in our life we come across a difficult situation. Now, once we are in this situation, we think and we say to ourselves and we make dua that, "Oh Allah, if only this situation had not come upon me. If only I had not fallen into this situation. If only this did not come into my life." And then we make that dua to take away that problem that we're in. However, many a time Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes away the problem before we even fall into it. But we do not realize. And this brings me to something that happened not very long ago in our lives. So, just a quick personal story. Regarding regarding evil that is about to happen. And it's something that we can't really see. However, sometimes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us glimpses of it. Now, the last Eid, the Eid that went by previously, some of you will know this story. And on that Eid day, alhamdulillah, it was a good day. And in the evening, everything had concluded, everything had finished. Although it was an Eid in lockdown, everything had finished, concluded. Now, at that time, my father heard an alarm go off in front of our house somewhere. The alarm of a car. Now, if anyone knows my car, they know how much trouble I get into because my car alarm is always going off. So we thought, yeah, it's probably just my alarm again. It's extremely sensitive. I mean, anyone walking past would just set that alarm off. And I thought, okay, it's probably just my car again. And I went outside to turn the alarm off. However, I realized it wasn't my car, rather it was my father's van, my dad's van. So I came back and told him, and I thought, oh, it's just gone off, as it usually does sometimes. However, my father he found it really strange. He was bewildered. And he said, are you sure it just went off? That's not like my van. So I thought, okay, it's a bit strange, but we'll check the cameras. Now, we've got CCTV fitted in front of the house, overlooking the road. This is from last year. So we checked the cameras and we looked in the CCTV, and we saw just a few minutes ago, someone came and tried to open the door of the van, and it didn't open. So then they went around to the other side and tried to open that door, and it didn't open. So then they went around to the back and tried to open the back door, and it opened. However, that triggered the alarm to go off. Now, when the alarm went off, they quickly got into their car and they drove away. However, that is something that really opened our eyes to how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protected us on that day from any harm coming. And a lot of the times this will happen in our future. Allah will protect us from many different things and we won't realize it. And because of that, we aren't able to do shukr for it. And that's why we as humans must remain in a constant state of shukr. Now, for example, that Eid day, we'd think of it as if something good had happened. For example, a guest had come down, someone who hasn't come down in a while, we would have thought, oh, such an amazing Eid day, because something good happened. However, do we ever think of it from this angle that, oh, what an amazing day, because something bad didn't happen? For example, if the van had got stolen on that day, what a bad day it would have been for us. We would have been thinking about it for so long that, oh, an Eid day, it got stolen, it was such a depressing day, it was so sad. Yet, Allah stopped that from happening, and that in itself is something so good and such a huge favour that we as humans don't really realise. A lot of the times people say, oh, the best day in my life was when, oh, my child was born, or the best day in my life was the day I went to Alton Towers, or the most fun day was the day I went to the local park. Yet, do we ever say the best day in my life was when this calamity didn't happen? How many a time does a person have a calamity come in their life and they say that was the worst day of my life? If that calamity hadn't happened, that would have been the best day of my life. So many people, if you were to go to them and ask them about a certain day they had in their life, in order to erase that day, what would they today give up? And there will be many people you will find who will be willing to give £1,000, £2,000, £10,000 even, for even just one day, for Allah to take away that one day. Yeah, what about when Allah takes away those certain days from our lives without us even realizing that He is taking them away? And that's why we as humans must remain in this constant state of shukr. And a way to get that is by making constant dua. You make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and He will give you what you want, and if it is good for you, and if it is not good for you, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will withhold it from you. And instead He will prevent a calamity coming your way. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us the ability to continually ask dua in this way. Now, another quick point over here. The Bani Israel had asked over here for water. They asked Musa alayhi salam to do dua for water. Now, Bani Israel had needed water up until now, but they weren't in a dire situation where they were about to die. They were not on the verge of death, and because of that they weren't desperate for water. Only now were they desperate for water, and only when they were desperate for water did they ask for it. Isn't that a strange statement? However, that is humanity in a nutshell. Insan in a nutshell. Insan is such, he doesn't realize he requires something or he needs something until the item is gone from him and it goes away from him. For example, you live your normal life, your cozy life in your house, and you're happy with everything is going well, and then suddenly something is taken from you. And then you turn to Allah. You make dua upon dua to get it back. Say, oh Allah, let me have that thing back. This time I'll be different. This time I'll make sure I look after it. This time I will worship you properly. I will stay away from haram. I will do my best actions. Only when Allah takes that thing away from us. However, is that what is required for us to turn back to Allah? Does it require us to lose our prized possessions in order to turn back to Allah? Rather, we should be turning to Allah before we lose our prized possessions. Because if we do that, then Allah will not need to take them away from us. You see, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a certain level for us. We make dua, oh Allah, get us into Jannah. Now for us to get into Jannah, we need to do a certain amount of actions. We need to make a certain amount of dua. We need to pray a certain number of salah. Now, if we cannot do that, yet we're making the dua that, oh Allah, get us to Jannah, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will have to take it into His own hands and take something away from us, so we do start doing that. Allah will need to make us start praying to Him. If we don't pray out of our own accord, and we don't read extra Quran, we don't pray our nawafil, Allah will take something away from us. He will make us turn to Him. He will make us become practicing. He will make us start doing our dhikr, and then we will start doing that, and we will be able to reach that level for which we had made dua in the first place, which was Jannah, of course. Now, before moving on, just quickly looking at the ni'mah that is water itself. The ni'mah that they made dua for, which was water. Looking at water itself, how ajib is this ni'mah? Water is the one that every single living thing is in need of. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, Allah khalaqa kulla dabbatin min ma'. And Allah created every animal and beast from water. They all have water inside of them. Now, what type of creation or thing is water? What an ajib thing. Imagine if you were to make dua to Allah, that, oh Allah, give me something amazing and give me in the most simple way. What is the most amazing thing? Water. And what is the most simple way in which Allah gives it? He just throws it on us. Rain. Allah throws it from the sky and it just falls on us in a very simple manner. We don't need to do any hard labor or anything in order to get water. For today, all we need to do is open our tap, and there we go, we have water coming. And how does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make this happen? Through the whole evaporation cycle, where all the water gathers, and you see the surface area of the sea being so much of the earth that is required in order for the water to be evaporated. For example, if you were to have a cup, and you put that cup of water in your garden, how long would it take to get evaporated? How long until that cup is empty? You have to wait hours. However, if you were to spill that cup of water, and it were to spread and have a large surface area, within minutes it would get evaporated. In the same way, so much of the earth's surface is full of water, so it could quickly be evaporated in this manner. See, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala Himself is the maker of all these laws and science and physics. He is the controller of all of these. Allah made all of these different laws, and He controls the constants, and also, more importantly, the variables. The constants, i.e. clouds will give rain, that is a constant. However, where will that cloud go? That is a variable. So whether a nation receives water or not, that is a variable. So Allah sends it at times and He withholds it at times, depending on where it is going. So every single human being is provided for in this manner, and that is through Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala controlling the variables and making sure that the water reaches all places. Final thing before we move on to the next ayah, inshallah, and it's a very ajib point over here. Mufassirin say regarding the Bani Israel, that when they saw this miracle, Bani Israel, and they'd had their water and they drank to their fill, and now they were satiated, they thought to themselves, and they started to speak amongst themselves, and they said, what do you think that we take back these rocks with us? These rocks from which the water had gushed out, they thought, what do you think we take these rocks with us? In case we run out of water again, and we'll have these rocks with us. What a ajib way of thinking, what a strange way of thinking. And we look at this and we say, how could you be so simple and to think that these rocks are the cause and the means of your water? However, I say to you, is it not the same thing today? Do we not rely on different means today? For example, medicine. Do we not think that the medicine is the thing that will cure us? Rather, the medicine is the means in which Allah puts the shifa. The cure is only through Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You can take as many medicine as you want. However, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not want it to work, it will not work. Yet many a time, if you can make dua, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will cure you. And you see this in the story of Nuh alayhi salam and his son. When Nuh alayhi salam told his son to come onto the ship as there was a flood coming, and he was climbing onto different places and he wasn't able to save himself from the water. And he said, "No, father, I'm going to find the highest mountain and I'm going to climb the highest mountain, and that will save me from this water, that will save me from this flood." So he was thinking of the different means that he could use, rather than trusting in the ability of Allah. And Nuh alayhi salam said, "La asim al-yawm," there is no safety on this day. There is no saving on this day except with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. To continue, in the next ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَإِذْ قُلْتُمْ يَا مُوسَى. And remember when you said, "O Musa, لَن نَصْبِرَ عَلَىٰ طَعَامٍ وَاحِدٍ." We cannot endure the same meal every day. فَادْعُ لَنَا رَبَّكَ يَخْرُجْ لَنَا مِنْ تُنْبِتُ الْأَرْضِ. So just call upon your Lord on our behalf. He will bring forth for us some of what the earth produces. من بقلها وقثائها وفومها وعدسها وبصلها. Of herbs and cucumbers, garlic, lentils and onions. قال أتستبدلون الذي هو أدنى بالذي هو خير. Musa scolded them, "Do you exchange that which is better for that which is worse? اهبطوا مصرا. You can go down to any village. فإن لكم ما سألتم. You will find what you have asked for. وضربت عليهم الذلة. They were stricken with disgrace. والمسكنة and misery. وباءوا بغضب من الله. And they invited the displeasure of Allah for rejecting Allah's signs and unjustly killing the prophets. ذلك بأنهم كانوا يكفرون بآيات الله ويقتلون النبيين بغير حق. ذلك بما عصوا. This is a fair reward. وكانوا يعتدون, for their disobedience and their violations. So over here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us about their behavior in terms of what He had given them. Now the first thing to look at over here, very strange. Let's go back to the ayah. Very strange how they mentioned Allah over here and they said, "Your Lord." And remember when you said, "O Musa, we cannot endure the same meal every day." وَإِذْ قُلْتُمْ يَا مُوسَى لَن نَصْبِرَ عَلَىٰ طَعَامٍ فَادْعُ لَنَا رَبَّكَ يُخْرِجْ. So they said, "O Musa, go back to your Lord to make dua." Now their way of speaking, it was very, very disgraceful, the way that they spoke, and very disrespectful. That they were saying such things about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, rather than saying "our Lord," they were saying "your Lord," as though to say, "Oh, He's no longer our kind Lord. He's no longer the Lord that's nice and kind to us. We'll just call Him your Lord now." Like how you get a child and that child is nurtured by both his mother and his father, and when the father is displeased with him, he says to his wife that, "Oh, go and tell your child to eat his food." As in, he's not my child anymore, although he is. However, it's an expression of speaking. And that was the way they spoke regarding Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as though Allah is in debt to them, as though Allah should bestow favor upon them, and they should just accept whatever He gives. And this was the way they spoke. And that's why we must be careful, and we must always remind ourselves that we owe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala everything, and Allah owes us nothing. So whatever happens in our life that is good is because we should be shakir to Allah, thankful to Allah, and we should realize that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us something good. And if anything bad has happened to us, we should blame our own sins, our own mistakes, and we should realize we need to correct something within ourselves. The example of this, now regarding what they were asking for, Allah had given them this food, man and salwa, from the heavens, and it was a special food, yet they were asking for something very simple. Now this was the type of food that they used to have in Egypt. Now the example of this is like a prisoner. Now this prisoner who is in jail, eventually you go to the jail and you bail him out. And after you've bailed him out, you give him a nice life, and he lives in your house with you, and he stays with you. Now after staying in your house for some time, and you're treating him as a guest and looking after him, he says to you one day that, "Oh, can't I have some of that prison food that they used to have? I mean, your food's okay as well. I don't mean any harm. And I don't mean to be disrespectful, no offense, but that prison food, that was like really nice. I want to try that prison food again. Now imagine how hurt you will feel that this prisoner, you've done everything for him, and the first thing that he can talk about is the food. And that too, he's talking about food which is a lot worse than the food that he's having over here. And that's why we as humans always need to be careful of falling into this trap of looking at things and forgetting where we came from. So many a time we'll start somewhere very low and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala raises us to a high station, to a high level. Alhamdulillah, oh, I used to earn this much a day and now I'm earning so and so amount a day. And we'll feel like, yes, alhamdulillah, I'm doing very well. But we forget where we came from. And we think, yes, this is all me. This is part of what I'm doing. And we look at people above us. Oh, so and so in the company, he's earning a lot more than me. And we say, oh, if only I could attain what he's attaining. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ told us, in the matters of deen, look at people above you. Look at people who are better than you. However, in matters of dunya, look at people who are below you. Look at people who have less than you. And be thankful for what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you. Now, Bani Israel, if you remember, they were slaves to Fir'aun. And because they were slaves to Fir'aun, they had this mentality of being able to work for their food. And they would work for their food. Now, regarding their working for their food, we will speak about this in a minute. However, I want to speak a little bit about being slaves. Now, them being slaves to Fir'aun, they had this mentality of being slaves and they wanted to do hard labor. This was innate inside of their nature now. Now, the only thing that you can be a slave to and feel content in your heart is being the slave of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When you're the slave to Allah, you cannot be a slave to anyone else. Otherwise, you will always be a slave to someone or something. I remember in secondary school, our teacher used to say, mashallah, Ustad Mujahid, used to say that, oh, people say that slavery is gone. Yeah, I look around and I see slaves to society. Anything society does, people copy them. In society, everyone's wearing their trousers a little bit lower than they should. People start copying them. And if you don't, people look down upon you. People laugh at you. People think, oh, what is this person doing? Oh, so-and-so hairstyle everyone is doing, you'll have to copy it. Is this not slavery? In different terms, however, is it not the same thing? And if you try to fit in with anyone, you will have to be a slave like that. Only when you be the slave to Allah and you allow everything to do what it wants, however you think to yourself, I'm only doing everything for Allah, then you are free and you feel content inside of your hearts. Otherwise, you will always be the slave to different opinions, different fashions, different trends, or whatever else it may be. Now, back to the people of Bani Israel, regarding them working hard for their food. Now, this is the type of mentality that they had, that, oh, we need to work for our food. Why is this? Mufassirin say this is because they did not trust that Allah will continue giving them man and salwa. Remember, man and salwa was a food that Allah would give them daily and provide for them daily. However, they didn't feel safe for their future. And how many times does that happen to us? That, oh, we earn enough to get from paycheck to paycheck, month to month. However, we don't feel safe. We think, oh, we need a savings. What if something happens? Without putting that trust in Allah, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make it work for us. So over here where Musa alayhi salam says that ihbitu misran, go down to the city. There are actually two opinions on this. The Mufassirin say, one, Musa alayhi salam meant that go down to any city and you will find what you're looking for. Meaning, leave us, leave the rest of the Bani Israel, and you're exiled and you can go down and live with any other city and you can live their lives and you can eat this type of food. However, you will no longer be considered as the people of Musa. And the second opinion is that Musa alayhi salam was saying to them, Ihbitu Misran, return to Egypt. Go back to Egypt, and in Egypt you will find that very food that you are desiring and the food that you are missing. Now, because they trusted their own ability to be able to grow man before and above their trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you can see the displeasure in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam in regards to the nation of the ummah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You see, everything that happens, we have to remind ourselves and we have to realize that it is all from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There is no such thing as chance. So there is no such thing as, oh, tomorrow you may not have enough to get by, and by chance you happen to not have enough to get by. There is no such thing. Everything happens from Allah, everything is planned and everything is written. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِنَّهُ هُوَ أَضْحَكَ وَأَبْكَى إِنَّهُ هُوَ أَمَاتَ وَأَحْيَا. Indeed, He is the one that makes a person laugh and makes a person cry. He is the one that gives a person death and gives another life. And that's why we need to have this in our hearts, and we need to always focus on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and realize that everything comes from Him. Any problem in our life, turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and realize that He is the only one that can take you out. Of course, you will do your own part, you will play your own part, but the first thing you need to do, the first name you need to call is the name of Allah. Any problem, whose name do we call first? We'll call our mother, our father, our brothers, our sisters, but first of all it should be Allah, and only after that should you be dialing anyone else's number. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us that ability. So, to continue, over here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continues this ayah and speaks about how they earned the displeasure of Allah by rejecting Allah's signs and then unjustly killing prophets. So how did this result in killing prophets? It seems like a huge jump. All they were doing was showing displeasure for some food, and the next thing you know, they're killing prophets. How did it go from one step to another? And that is the wisdom and hikmah in Islam, that once you tread on a path, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells you, you are not allowed to go on that path. Any path that leads to destruction, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made it. If a person wants to stay away from drinking, and his whole life he doesn't drink, how easy is it for him to not have a drink? It's easy, very simple. However, a second person, he doesn't drink, however he has friends who drink, he owns a business in which there are drinks, he hangs around with people who drink. Now for him, it is a lot more difficult to drink. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has chosen this first path for us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants it to be easy for us to stay away from these grave sins. And when you stay away from the very first step, it's very easy. However, to stay away from the last step, it's very difficult. For the second person, they are in a very difficult and hard situation. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this way has made Islam very easy for us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to be able to follow Islam with our own hearts in a very easy manner without putting ourselves and our families, our lives in much difficulty. Final point before we end today's tafsir lesson, inshaAllah. Now, in this ayah, Allah spoke about how the Bani Israel would kill prophets. Now, what was their reason for killing prophets? The first thing being, what is the difference between a prophet and a messenger? Now, messengers would come with a book. The people would have to then follow those rules. Now, prophets would come within those people and guide people back onto those rules that the messengers had already brought. Now, the Bani Israel would be given a set of rules, i.e. the Torah from Musa alayhi salam, and then they would start following those rules, and eventually they would go off track and stop following the rules. And that's when Allah would send a prophet, and the prophet would come to them and tell them that, oh, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala needs you to follow His rules properly. He needs you to stop being disobedient. He needs you to stop tricking each other, stop stealing, stop taking money from one another, stop backbiting, stop hurting each other, stop fighting, stop killing. So the Prophet would come and expose these faults that they had. And a lot of the times they would not accept this, and they would end up killing the Prophet. However, it wasn't as simple as they would say, no, this isn't true. Rather, they would bring out some loopholes. And they would say, oh, we weren't actually killing each other, we were just defending ourselves. Oh, we weren't doing this, rather we were doing that. And the Prophet would expose their loopholes, and they would not be able to accept that, so they would try to remove that Prophet from their own qawm, from their own people. And that is very similar to what we see today. Many a time, someone comes to us and says, oh, brother, this action that you're doing, Islamically is not right. Oh, you have a mortgage, Islamically you shouldn't be going for a mortgage. You should look for something Islamic. Oh, Islamically you're doing this isn't right. How many a time do we try to find a way out? We'll go to Google and find a fatwa in which it's acceptable, in which it's okay to do so and so an action, without realizing the effect that it's having on our hearts, that in our hearts we know, oh, this doesn't seem right. It doesn't feel right. However, we try to find some type of a fatwa in which someone may say it's acceptable, and then we try to follow that fatwa. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives the ability to follow Islam the way it's been brought, and without trying to